Well, this is one that's a bit odd. See, this is the Wesley Crusher screws up in Starfleet Academy episode. So the vast majority of this, if playing this as a TTRPG thing, you would probably want to run as an investigation thing where the players are trying to figure out what happened in the accident at Starfleet Academy and not being the crew that had the accident happen to them. Which, sure, why not? Because, one, these are all Starfleet Academy cadets, and most of them are new characters. Now, some of them are characters who, despite appearing for the first time in this episode, go on to be used in later episodes for other roles. And then there's the case of Locarno, who apparently was originally considered for the role that Tom Paris has in Star Trek Voyager, but they decided that they just didn't want to use Locarno because that had too much baggage associated with it, so they decided to create a new character who was very similar to Locarno and just happens to be played by the same actor. Anyway, though, Zito Jax also got reused for some things. Joshua Albert, well, he died and was never seen again, I think. There's one more. Let's see here. I'll say. Well, okay. When I say never seen again, I mean like never seen alive again. Because quite frankly, yeah, it's like Lower Decks has some flashbacks from when Beckett Mariner was a cadet at Starfleet Academy, and she apparently met Nova Squadron. Jean Hager. This is the other one. Who, again, was kind of sort of like the fifth person, because the way Nova Squadron was presented, there were the two most important characters. Wesley, because he was actually kind of sort of main cast for this series. So he's actually an important character. Then you have Nick Locarno, who is kind of sort of the leader of Nova Squadron. Then you have Zito Jax and Joshua Albert. Joshua Albert's the one who dies in the incident, and thus is the reason why there's a investigation. It's like, what happened? Why did he die? Yeah, well, people figured that out, and quite frankly, it's one of those situations where the cover up basically requires people to not investigate to find out the truth. Because, as it turns out, the truth was actually plainly there for everyone to see. But this is one of those things where the team investigating needed to find the truth and figure out where the information that would give everyone what they needed to know was located. And in that regard, Picard and his team succeeded, because of course they did, because they're heroes. Actually, to be honest, in Star Trek The Next Generation, Picard and his team don't actually have unqualified successes all of the time. Some of the times they have provisional successes, and there's a few times when it's arguable that they actually lose. They just don't die. Because certain of the episodes of Star Trek The Next Generation, especially when they're setting up a new bad guy like the Borg, they have to make the bad guy scary. They have to give you this feeling that uh, you have reasons to be scared of them. So having Picard get assimilated, hey. Anyway, though, so go back to this. In a way, this does kind of sort of count as both a win and a loss for the main cast of the Enterprise D simultaneously. Why? Because of the fact that Wesley Crusher is guilty of a crime. Yeah. Wesley is a relatively minor crime, though, because Nick Locarno it was his idea and everyone else just played along with it. Sure. And as I mentioned earlier, Sito Jaxa actually does get stationed on board the Enterprise D. Nick Locarno goes to prison, Joshua Albert's dead. Wesley Crusher also goes to the Enterprise D because, of course, he does. He's main cast. Gene Hadger is the one character who just kind of sort of disappears. Like I mentioned here, it's like there's a cameo of her in that Lower Decks episode, but we don't actually have her do anything other than just be seen there. Anyway, so yeah, whatever. Now, the the whole thing of using Nova Squadron in some later stuff was actually a rather amusing idea. It's just, well, the original Nova Squadron's kind of gone. Whatever. Uh, uh, it's kind of one of those things. Just like I could actually visualize a group of players deciding to call their team in the game that. Well. Anyway, so yeah, overall, this episode is actually one of the ones that what I would take away from it for the purposes of playing a TTRPG. Despite the fact that most of the stuff in this episode barely gets brought up later, this is an episode that introduced a whole lot of new characters. Despite the fact that a lot of them don't get mentioned much later, but all of Nova Squadron is in the episode. Granted, only one of them was a pre-existing character. So that's 4 characters there. But also, because this is the first time we actually go to Starfleet Academy and see Starfleet Academy, it means it's also the first time we see a whole bunch of Starfleet Academy personnel, like Mr. Boothby. And it also discusses several other things, like the whole thing with the Covord starburst and stuff like that. Oh, that's another thing, is that apparently the whole thing with the Covord starburst, part of what makes it dangerous is when you do it wrong. Doing it right, it's fine. These guys did not do it right. And yeah, you see where that's going. Oh, and also, one thing Picard mentions about this is that the maneuver was banned at the Academy 100 years ago. Yeah, 100 years ago, they were using a different design of shuttlecraft. Makes you wonder what the relative safety actually is. Don't know. And that is something that you would actually get to make up in a TTRPG, because that's really not something that the TV show actually goes into. It's like, why was it so dangerous 100 years ago versus now? Because they're not using the same shuttlecraft design. And quite frankly, the Cold War Starburst is one of those maneuvers where you read the explanation for what the maneuver is, and you're like, why are you bothering with that? But whatevs. Now, the previous occasion where there was a catastrophic training accident involving this maneuver, all of the five cadets were killed. However, that was also had a major difference, is that in that case, they did not have emergency transporter beam out devices to imme- immediately retrieve them. And that is what made the difference here, is that in Wesley's case, all five shuttlecraft were destroyed, the same as in the previous incident 100 years prior. It's just that Wesley and three of his classmates lived, and the other one died because, in his case, the emergency beam out just wasn't fast enough. And of course, oh yeah, Picard does this thing about how he had the belief that Wesley had the potential to be an outstanding Starfleet officer, and we never saw that. That's an interesting thing. Is that instead of becoming a Starfleet officer, Wesley does that whole thing with the Traveler and goes off exploring alternate dimensions or something or other. We never really find out a whole lot about what he does with the Traveler, but that's a different episode. So yeah, this episode. You could definitely set up a situation where you have a crew of players investigate something that an incident at Starfleet Academy and make up some uh, justification for why the players are doing it and not Starfleet Academy personnel. Now, one that's actually surprisingly simplistic and not necessarily what you would want to go with, and also not what they went with in this episode, is simply that the superintendent has reason to believe that maybe possibly some of the teachers were in on it. And because, depending on the nature of the incident, you could have the inciting incident that is being investigated require methodology that is not something that the Academy cadets would have been able to simply access on their own. And thus, or I guess you could say, it would be difficult for them to access it on their own. And with the logic here being that they would have to, steal a key card or something, security, in order to get into it, and wouldn't normally be able to just like walk in and pick it up or something like that. You know, you use your imagination to think up something that fits whatever story you're trying to tell. Anyway, though, it's an interesting sort of change of pace because it's an internal investigation at a relatively low level where it's no grand conspiracy. I mean, it's a conspiracy, yes, but it's not a big conspiracy. It's a very small conspiracy. It's something that you could possibly even use as a justification for starting a story arc of some kind. Heck, if you really wanted to, you could even have someone doing the investigation run into some sort of irregularity that causes a further investigation to start and find a real uh, danger to the Federation and not just cadets accidentally killing themselves. But hey, there's a whole lot of other things you could do. I mean, because like meeting people like Admiral Brand, I mean, yes, it's interesting and all, but Admiral Brand and Captain Satelk are basically just people who are running the academy. Nothing particularly fancy. But if you did actually want to have the players play as a group of cadets at Starfleet Academy, you would need a proper group of NPCs to be the Academy staff. So, if that was the case, then sure, go for it. Have fun building your team of Academy staff. Yeah. There's a lot of things you could do in this vein, but you're not going to be copying this exact story, probably. And a lot of the ideas that I mentioned here are things that are just using the Starfleet Academy idea and not even, you know, what happened in this story. At any rate, I think that's enough about this. See you guys later.